So, 75 says, "Hi, Mr. Luke. How's it going?" It's going very well, thank you. What does ego stand for? Okay, so ego. There are two common ways that we use ego in the English language. Let's not say what it stands for. Let's just say how we use the word ego, okay? Perhaps the most common that people use is ego to mean being a little bit too self-confident to the point of arrogance, right? You're doing that only for ego, or that's your ego talking. I want others to recognize me and tell me I'm great and think that I'm wonderful and be impressed by me. Why? Because I'm trying to satisfy my ego. So we say things like, that's your ego talking, or to stroke someone's ego, right? When I want something from my boss, I always remember that first you have to stroke his or her ego. I know that sounds a little weird, but we say that. To stroke someone's ego is like to pet them. Say, oh, you're very smart and wonderful. And then they think, oh, yes. And they feel very good about that. And you say, I need $30,000 for this. Or I want a raise. Then you ask what you want to ask after you stroke their ego. So we use it that way. Not so much selfishness, but a little bit too much, let's say, self-confidence to the point of arrogance. That would be the common way it's used. But it refers to a psychological concept that was developed by Sigmund Freud. So in Freud's system, there are three parts to the self or the person. You have the id, the ego, and the superego. And I'm not saying it's right. I mean, not my favorite way to explain a human being. I like Jung better. But okay, so the id, is sort of the primitive self, the instinctual self, the part of yourself that is driven by your instincts only, right? The animal part, let's say. Then your ego is your higher mind, your higher self, the one that sees you as you. I'm me. I see me as me. You identify yourself as an individual person in the world, and you create an image about what you are that makes you you. So you can see how there's a connection there. What makes me me is what people think of me. So you can see how there's a connection between how we use it to mean something like arrogance to the psychological meaning of the part of us, the part of an individual, which sees itself as itself, right? Which is sitting on top of the id in a way. Then there's the superego. And the superego is all of the cultural norms, morality, and ethics that sit within us, but they come from the culture. They're like placed in there. So when you feel guilty for doing something, why do you think that? Well, that's related to the superego. Your superego is what gives you your ideas about what right and wrong mean. Right? What is right and what is wrong? These are kind of implanted in you, in a way, by your culture. So what you think is right and wrong is shaped by your environment. And it might be different from what I think is right and wrong, which may be shaped by my environment. So that's the general idea. But to be clear, an ego isn't necessarily selfish. It can be. So it can be associated with selfishness. But really, it's more about the I, the me. When we talk about ego, that's the I part of myself, right? The id part is the part that I share with all others, the more animal part that I share in common with other human beings. The ego is the thing that makes me unique and special and different, and it is maybe my consciousness, and it is how I define myself separate from others. That's my ego. So I hope that makes sense. I think there's a better way. If you're interested, Jung's idea, much more interesting, in my opinion. Just my opinion. But I think that answers the question. I hope it answers the question. If you haven't already, guys, don't forget to hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my full courses. Those are on sale, by the way, in the links in the description.